I thought your Ja Morant take was interesting. Let's talk about Ja Morant, because there was an irony to it. It was almost a paradox. You were railing against the safetyism when being concerned. You were railing against the safetyism of assessments of players while being concerned about Ja Morant's safety. So I found it to be an intriguing take in that way. You were voicing your concern that he would get hurt. And it's funny. It's like you don't hear that concern from media people a lot, even though injuries are a big factor. Everybody talks about how teams are going to do as though we're playing NBA 2K and turned injuries off. But it's something to discuss. And it's an important question, not just for the Grizzlies, not just for Ja Morant, but for the league, because that's the next guy. The league is in a precarious point, I think.
They are. They need stars and rootable people that ingratiate themselves. Fun. Young people like them. Older fans like them.
Yeah. And we talk about instincts. My job is to describe things, but a lot of what matters is ineffable. You can't put words to it. I watch Ja Morant. I go, that guy's got that thing. I don't know what that thing is, but he's got that thing. Giannis doesn't have that thing. Love Giannis. Love watching him. Incredible player. Doesn't have that thing. Doesn't have that transcendent superstar in the United States of America.
Kawhi doesn't have it.
Oh, yeah. Kawhi doesn't have that thing. Steph Curry has that thing. LeBron James has angered a lot of people, but LeBron had that thing. Ja Morant has that thing. He has that thing that Derrick Rose had before he got hurt. He has that thing that Allen Iverson had when he was at the peak of his powers. That is not only a superstar, but that's somebody who is potentially box office, somebody who could save your league. He is the most important player in basketball. That might sound like an exaggeration because he plays in Memphis and because he's new on the scene. But this is a league right now that has post-Jordan popularity while their versions of Jordan in LeBron and Steph are still playing and getting older. They need somebody to take the reins.
They do.
So that's why I watched it with interest. And I think that people don't make the assessment you made, Colin, because they fear it will be taken the wrong way. They fear it will mean to a lot watching that you're rooting for an injury to happen. But I listened and I thought, yeah, that's a concern. He's flying in there. He's got a skinny frame. It's a scary thing. I hope they take care of him and they're careful.
Yeah, he's 174 pounds. Derrick Rose was 200. He is rail thin, and what's interesting, he really does compare to Rose, where he's beyond springy, super twitchy, wildly exciting, a highlight machine, struggles from three, forced to go to the rim, and Derrick Rose and him both played in the NBA without the hand check. You can't stay in front of him. You simply can't stay in front of him. I've argued this. I think I've told you. I think the NBA should bring the hand check back. You think it makes the league more physical. It doesn't. It keeps great guards out of the lane where they get hurt. You cannot defend. You can absolutely not stay in front of great guards. Translation, they go in, they're outweighed by 80 pounds, the floor is hard, the contact's brutal. Look at the number of injuries to point guards over the last 5 years. It's brutal. Wall, Westbrook, Chris Paul, D. Rose. For the record, Morant's been dinged up a couple of times already.
Yeah, and I also
Donovan Mitchell. Yeah.
And I also just think that maybe the theme of this podcast is how sometimes you can just outthink instincts by getting a little too into the numbers, thinking that you can just figure out what's popular algorithmically as opposed to just being a person. Algorithmically, I think the NBA looked at the situation and said, people love points. People love when points are scored. More points, good. More points equals viewers. Let's change the rules and make sure that guys are scoring as many points as possible. And what does it lead to? A bunch of flopping. And it turns out that the fans actually don't want 142 to 141. That's not what they want. It sounds good in theory. It's not what they want. They also don't want 75 to 72, as was happening in the early 2000s. There's a balance. There's a platonic ideal. They probably want it in that 100 to 110 range. And when it's the playoffs, they might want it a little bit lower because it's a grueling battle and every possession feels like life and death. That's what they want. So I don't know if hand check is the solution, but it does seem like the NBA needs to do a few things to bring the game back to something that is recognizable to people who have watched it forever instead of being a flopping plus 3-point contest. Credit to them for starting to call some of those flops, but yes, sometimes you can outthink yourself, and there are limitations. There are limitations. You can't just press turbo on the points and be, rewarded with a ton of people watching.
I am a believer that the one thing you can't change with an athlete is indifference. You love the sport, or you love what the sport provides for you. I don't buy Ben Simmons. I don't think he'll ever be solved. I don't think he's competitive. I don't think he loves the game. They've often said this about NBA centers. The reason there's so many busts is because they were 6'11" in 7th grade, and basketball was just the easiest thing for them to do. Ben Simmons is almost 6'11" and a guard. I don't think the Brooklyn Ben Simmons thing is going to work. Using your access, I've heard he's just not. I've heard he's odd, not a great guy, indifferent, doesn't love the game. What do you make? I think Harden in Philly is going to work magically and quickly because I think he's just one great player joining a very positive, optimistic, joyful locker room. What do you hear about Simmons that maybe I haven't heard?
I just remember there was somebody in the league, a player who met him, and the first question Simmons asked him was, "What's the first car you bought when you came to the NBA?" And that caused this player to go, "Oh, it's not a good sign that this rookie is coming." And this is the first topic of conversation. It's not, what do I need to get better at? How do I acclimate? Like that's the focus. Now, you could accuse me of overreading that or oversimplifying. I think we have swung way too far in this other direction, and you've called it safetyism, of almost doubting our own instincts in media and trying not to be critical in that way and not insinuate that a guy has a lack of love for the game. But I think that is an anecdote that reveals something, and I agree with you. And maybe there are criticisms of James Harden that he could be checked out or parties too much or whatever. But the thing about James Harden is he's a basketball genius.
Yeah.
He might not ingratiate himself to you as a fan when he's flopping and figuring out new and creative ways to get a foul call. But you ask Quinn Snyder, coach of the Jazz, and he will speak reverently because he's had to game plan against James Harden and figure out all kinds of ways to stop him. And the guy just always seems to solve the puzzle. He didn't solve the puzzle against those great Warriors teams, but that's a hell of a problem to solve. But Harden's a basketball genius. He's MVP level. And if you want to talk about the inner media game and how it influences the reporting, in the aftermath of that trade, it almost seemed like NBA media was saying, hey, it's pretty even. I like Ben Simmons as a fit. I think that has a lot to do with James Harden not having an agent and Ben Simmons being represented by one of the most powerful agencies. That was even the ruling on that trade, I believe, has something to do with it.